Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Our guest today is Professor Liao Dachi of National Science State University. And we've been talking about President Ma's inaugural address. As we know that different sectors of society respond differently to the speech. And also foreign countries also react very differently. How do you see the different responses from different societies?
I found that it's really interesting. But maybe it's a kind of a work for Mind to do in the future. Because just like you mentioned, the country is still divided. From people from the blue camp, from the KMT, especially legislator, they will say, okay, it's pretty good, and also it kind of cover every aspect of the societal problems. But certainly, one legislator from KMT, Chiu Yi, maybe some of our audience know him, he mentioned, okay, mind you didn't mention about economic issue, especially inflation. We immediately meet this problem, right? Everything got so, the prices get up and up. So some people complain about that. And even I also meet the people from the kind of labor sector. Yeah, he complained about, Mind You's speech is so boring, not excited, no dream. It's so pragmatic. Okay, that's one sector. And the DPP's members certainly dissatisfied with this speech. I think one quite interesting and remarkable is from the previous DPP presidential candidate, Xie Changting.
Frank Xie,
yeah, Frank Xie. He said, okay, even Mind You tried to show the kindness to the mainland China, but you know, tiger is tiger, a rabbit is rabbit. Tiger still want to eat the rabbit. Doesn't matter the rabbit try to entertain the tiger, try to make this kind of a comparison. So you can see that kind of divided opinions, even not only within the so-called pen blue, pen green, also within the KMT.
The KMT.
Yeah, usually maybe we expect, okay, you are from the same group. Maybe you will have the same kind of feeling, or at least to the public, you will say something, okay, good about the speech, but not really the story. From the international community, actually, Americans' reaction is kind of fair. Maybe they already know what you are going to say. Mind you, try to portray a kind of a role. It's not so unpredictable. It's predictable. Let's try to he tried to deliver to the international community. But mainland China so far is keep really low profile. Didn't say too much. But one word they try to use, maybe still the people from DPP or Green Camp are dissatisfied with, is Mind You use a kind of 1992 consensus serve as a kind of main framework to develop future relationship with mainland China. But people from DPP always say it's no such kind of 92 consensus. But Mind You still recognize that the existence of the 92 consensus. I think that's a kind of arguable, also debatable. In the future, I think still the kind of different opinion will complain about.
Apparently, it's a mission impossible to try to make a speech and to please everybody.
Everyone, yeah,
it's impossible. But apparently, you should be trying to unify the government, unify the country. But now, the fact is that his party, KMT, now controls 3/4 majority in the legislature and also the president's office. Do you think that in terms of policy making and policy implementation, the process will be much smoother than we had in the past 8 years?
Yeah, in a general kind of outlook, maybe the kind of policy implementation process or policy formulation process, especially between the legislative yuan and the executive yuan, should have a better relationship than the past 8 years. But, you know, situation is changing. You know, right now, the Mind You really enjoy the high popularity from the general public. But right now, we immediately meet the problem, just like I mentioned about the inflation of oil, everything. The utility prices. So we learn from the Korean case, South Korean experience. Even the high populated president, so difficult survival through a kind of inflation period. Right now, we can see even the kind of, because the new administration said they are going to have a immediately price increase for the oil and electricity and the water even. Then not only the DPP member blame about this kind of policy, also KMT members jump out to blend about this policy. So the general outlook maybe, and also follow a logic line is okay for a unified government. But you know, politicians are not that always logical. They have a lot of private interest concern.
That's right.
Especially if the current administration, you know, we have a two-head system. We have the president, we have the prime minister. So the communication line should develop between the president and the legislative yuan, or the current prime minister should play the main role to communicate with the legislative yuan. And mind you, we learn from his previous history, he liked to obey the constitutional rule. That means he tried to be a kind of reserve president, one always stand on the first front.
That's right.
That means a lot of his policy, he promised he have to render power to the prime minister to negotiate with the legislative yuan. Then under that situation, in the long run, we don't know whether the current the administration, like the current premier, Liu Zhaoxuan, will do a very good role to serve both the interest of president and also the interest of legislative yuan.
But the fact of the matter is that the president is directly elected by the people. So people are holding him accountable for everything, right?
Yeah.
But he appoints Liu Zhaoxuan as the prime minister. But the thing is, he doesn't have to face re-election. It's the president who needs to face re-election.
So there's a tension there. That's you mentioned about the kind of a dilemma of our constitutional rule. Yes, we have two heads. The president is directly elected by the people and got such a high popularity, but the prime minister appointed by him. But according to the constitutional rule, the prime minister has to face the kind of challenge from the legislative yuan. But the president has to take every responsibility then to face the future election, 2012.
That's right.
So the current president must feel very tensed and nervous about the kind of policy performance. And the current administration, certainly they will feel the same tension, but whether they will, the current president will satisfied with the performance of administration is still, let us wait and see.
Another relationship people now are paying attention to is the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Although they belong to the same party, but the thing is there are also tensions between these two branches of government. How do you see the, do you think that the legislative will be a rubber stamp?
I think I just went to legislative yuan this year. Actually, I think KMT, because as a rubber stamp, that means the biggest party in the legislative yuan currently is KMT. They occupy about 2/3 of the seats in the legislative yuan. That means they just kind of serve as good rabbits, serve the interest of a tiger, then become a rabbit, become the rubber stamp. But from what I learned today, I think they try to minimize that kind of rubber stance role. They try to give some input before the policy really formed. So they try to build up some communication channels. For example, they try to get the ministers, for example, for the education ministry, they try to invite the current minister to have a kind of private talk with the member in the education committee, the legislative yuan, to communicate some ideas. Before they form the policies, they have some communication.
So meet with the caucus member of the KMT first.
Yeah, caucus member. Yeah, meet the caucus member first, then to develop policy in the future. I think they try to solve that kind of dilemma. But when the policy goes to the legislative yuan, they already make some compromise.
That's right.
Negotiate before every problem go to the public. So I think that's I think also they learned a lesson from the previous DPP party.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good part of our party rotation. Yeah, DPP, they have to come struggle to work out a kind of policy line, and the legislator always feel we are left out, but we are important. But president got the pressure to hand out his achievement. And also so the prime minister have to do something to serve the president's interest. So a lot of dilemma. So they try to formulate a line. In the beginning, Chen Shui-bian tried to dominate, but it's so difficult to struggle out. So they try to learn something, but we still wait and see.
So that would be a possible new mechanism for this
mechanism,
kind of,
try to build a new coordination. But you know, there's also a kind of sensitive part is, at least I know about Ma Ying-jeou's team, they are really they don't want to have a kind of party dominant
that's
above
right.
the KMT is not so dominant. They don't want to have a previous use the party to lead the party, the government. But right now they try to very cautious to avoid that kind of who lead who, but
right.
try to negotiate something. But still working.
But speaking of the party, as we know in the past, KMT was a Leninist party state, and the Central Standing Committee of the party makes policies first and then transfer it to the executive branch.
The executive branch.
How about now?
I think it's totally different. That kind of Leninist impression, they already throw out into the history.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the KMT fully understand to a certain extent. They know if without Ma Ying-jeou, they may have nothing. Right now, it's difficult for them to go back to the power. So they try to balance that kind of view. But you know, this kind of tradition, Ma Ying-jeou's side, he really want to avoid that kind of party lead the government. But the KMT tradition, especially the kind of old generation, KMT still lead, like the current chairman, Wu Boxiong, he still have that kind of impression, still feel, okay, you cannot just kick us out after you elected, ignore us at all. So there's a certain tension still there because the Leninist tradition is not so easy to totally disappear at one day. So they try to negotiate, work out some platform. So they organize so-called, I think maybe you already see that, the 5 giant leader to meet every week, the so-called peak conference. But it's still kind of ambivalent.
But now, inside the KMT, nobody can challenge Ma Ying-jeou because he's now with a strong mandate from the people. But as you mentioned, that the popularity may drop, you know. So what if in the future his popularity dropped to a certain point that some people in the party disagree with what he's done and so on? Will there be tension or conflicts among different players in the KMT?
I think there's almost for sure. You know, that's kind of destiny, the kind of a future for every party. That things will happen. If you lose the popularity, you lose the public support. Then you know there's always within the party you have several factions or big players. They try to find an opportunity to fight against you or try to find a kind of position for them to fight for in the future. So I think it's if really Ma Ying-jeou's popularity dropped very, very dramatically, from currently maybe 60% something to only 20, 30 something, easy to be challenged by internal, within the KMT's political players.
But in the long run, that this kind of Leninist party control of the state should be transformed into a more healthy democratic system. But when we come back, we'll talk about not only what problems are within the KMT, but also the inter-party relationship, because that's very important for Taiwan to have a healthier party politics. So don't go away. We'll be back after these messages.